39 years ago, on May 18th, South Korean citizens took to the streets to fight against the oppressive government. In particular, in the city of Gwangju in Jeollanam-do Province, more than 160 unarmed civilians were killed, while thousands of others were wounded in their fight for democracy. The significance of the May 18th democratization movement holds to the Korean people is huge, but the entire truth about the incident has not been revealed. Today, we go in depth about what else needs to be done about the historic democratic movement with Dr. Kim Sang-woo, chairman of East Asia Cultural Project. Thank you for coming in today.
Good to be here again.
For our viewers who may not be familiar with this historic day, could you start us off by explaining the significance of this May 18th democratization movement?
Well, Korea in that period was in tumultuous period because in 1979 in October, Park Chung-hee was assassinated after 18 years of authoritarian rule. The country was partly in chaos, in shock, because no one expected President Park to go like that so quickly, so abruptly. And of course, there were others who were full of hope. Finally, democratic country or free elections can take place. In those confusing times, the then commander of the military intelligence, Chun Doo-hwan, General Chun Doo-hwan, seized the military through a coup d'etat. And as protests all over the country took place, he declared, or he had the government declare martial law, and also arrested opposition leaders like late former President Kim Dae-jung for conspiracy to start a rebellion. And this, in result, has outraged the citizens of Gwangju and all of Jeollado. So, as they furthered, nationwide martial law was taking place. On the 18th of May in Gwangju, the students of Gwangju raised up in a peaceful manner in marches and declarations, asking for the termination of martial law and the release of Kim Dae-jung. The military reacted as a result of that, and on the 21st, they opened fire to unarmed civilians. And there was, as a result, the citizens of Gwangju and students, of course, as well, armed themselves and retaliated against and defended the city. And they took the city for 5 days. In those 5 days, actually, it was a very peaceful community. There was no looting, there was no crime, and there was a participatory rally of thousands of people every day to deal with the urgent matters. So it was kind of an example of direct democracy, in a sense. However, the military crackdown on the 27th, they took the city. On the night of the 26th, those who remained to fight till the end and struggle against the military, the spokesperson for the Citizens' Army, as they called themselves, was Yoon Sang-won. And he said that we will be defeated today, but history will lead us to victory. So in a sense, that fueled, even though the uprising was cracked down, that continued to fuel the flame for democracy. And in 1987, it was instrumental because the slogan then was to remember Gwangju, brought about the direct presidential election to be accepted by the government of Chun Doo-hwan.
Now, as part of efforts to reveal the truth about what exactly happened that day during that movement, fresh testimonies continue to emerge, with the latest one being made by Kim Yong-chang, who served as the U.S. military intelligence agent at that time. He said that former President Chun Doo-hwan and then Defense Security Commander Chun Doo-hwan had visited Gwangju on May 21st, 1980. Now, it was the day the military opened fire to civilians in Gwangju. What does his statement imply?
Well, it implies that Chun Doo-hwan may have ordered the shooting or the opening fire of Gwangju citizens who were at that time still unarmed. But having said that, it is a testimony. It's circumstantial evidence. The so-called fact-finding committee has to dig hard now that they have these testimonies to go by, so they can look in a direction for that. They need to find concrete evidence that makes that case more legal, because we are a democracy and we do things in the due process of law, because it is an achievement that has been obtained with the sacrifice of citizens in Gwangju as well. So it is a valuable present, and we need to abide by that in a democratic way.
The former U.S. intelligence officer Kim Yong-chang also said that on that day, May 21st, former President Chun Doo-hwan is presumed to have made an order of open fire, not just open fire, but shoot to kill. What do you make of that statement?
Well, if that is true, then it's very serious, because shooting to kill unarmed citizens, their own people, is I think, a very serious crime, a crime against humanity, and even can be referred to genocide in a sense. If that is the case, if there is evidence, concrete evidence that backs up these testimonies, then of course those who are responsible has to pay the price for that.
So finding solid evidence would be the key to reveal the truth.
It's always the case, and we do have the fact-finding committee, which has access to all kinds of documents and materials. So I think if they dig hard enough, if there is evidence, they will find it. Already, I think they found some evidence concerning the helicopter shooting.
The helicopter shooting, which I am about to touch upon right now. Former President Chun Doo-hwan is currently on trial on libel charges for defaming the late priest Cho Chol-hyun, who was also an activist. Now, in question is whether, as you've said, there was a helicopter shooting and whether Chun Doo-hwan was aware of it. Now, could these fresh testimonies that are emerging recently have an impact on this libel trial?
Of
the
course.
ruling of this trial?
Of course. But again, it's testimonies after 40 years, it's already 40 years ago, and those testimonies need to be backed up with concrete evidence. In the court of law, you need those kinds of things to go hand in hand. You cannot just go on the testimonies. But having said that, as I said, the fact-finding committee seems to have uncovered some of the evidences, had facts. For instance, the building across the provincial government building, there is a building, 10-story building called Tail, and they found some evidence that there has been some shooting that only could be done by helicopter, from helicopter or something. And then they have found some documents. I think yesterday, I think I read something about that as well.
The May 18th democratization movement is known to have a certain impact on the South Korea-U.S. relations at that time. Could you explain to us about that?
Well, the student movement for democratization of the country became very anti-American as a result, partly as a result of Gwangju, because they believed that the U.S. Approved the crackdown of Gwangju uprising. And also they were very angry at the US government supporting the Chun Doo-hwan regime. once again, a military dictatorship. So in the mid-80s, the student movement believed that Korea, although on the surface was politically independent country, but militarily, economically, it was a colony of the US. And their goal, priority, was to drive out the US imperialists. And so they had a very sympathetic attitude towards North Korea, because North Korea was self-reliant under the Juche Sasang. They were truly independent in the eyes of the students of that time. So they engaged in these Juche philosophy and their National League kind of movements. So these people who were the main activists of the student movement are now in the leadership positions of Korean society in various fields, especially in politics and also in government as well.
And that kind of ideology still lives on in some parts of the Korean society, right?
Hopefully, maybe they have outgrown that, because in those days, Korea was a different country, and they were also students and young. Maybe they have become more realists, but there is a view that still that kind of ideology remains to a certain extent.
Right. Now, a special law was established in 1990 in an effort to reveal the truth about these democratic movements that happened in Korea, as well as to compensate the victims. But many say that much more needs to be done. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, but we need to know, we need to have an accurate history and to determine what really happened. But in the case of Gwangju, it's not really history in the sense that the victims or the people that were involved or engaged in the incident are still living. But there needs to be, for the unity of this Korean society, we need closure, because we cannot continue to just keep on living in the past. We need to move forward. And unfortunately, at the moment, there is a division within Korean society about these very important issues. We need to be able to mature and grow and evolve as a result of learning from history. So, in other words, we need to have a genuine dialogue between the opposing sides in Korean society. And the way that we can come about is to admit that I might be wrong.
Why is it so important for a closure of the May 18th democratization movement?
Well, not just that, but we are still, in various areas, we're still lingering in the past and always, but of course, it will not end, because for the people who were directly involved, there is no complete satisfaction. They will live with that trauma. But as a society, as a nation, we need to come together, and we cannot divide ourselves into two sides. We need to find a way to heal the wound and find a way to move forward, and to, because there are, we cannot just stand still.
What are some of the things that we should be careful not to miss out or to overlook when trying to find a closure and to move forward from this point on?
As I said, we need to be able to respect and try to understand the position of the other side as well, not just being wrapped up in one's own thoughts. In other words, we have to think about that period as well. In the 1980, Korea also was part of this Cold War era, where there was so-called the Western Bloc and the Communist Bloc. And it was a period where there was, the US needed allies, and sometimes those allies could have been military dictatorship, because they were not communists. But having said that, there was always two sides to that. The late former President Kim Dae-jung told me once that the US has two sides. One side is that there are those who support and the de facto dictator regime. There's another side that supports people like himself. He had been his life has been saved more than once by the US supporters. For instance, civil society, media, Democrat Party, those people. So the US is not a country that is unilateral, it's a diverse country. As well, Korea is now a very diverse country, but it also needs to be able to understand differences.
All right, I'm afraid that is all the time we have for you. Thank you for your insights today.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you right back here same time next week. Have a great weekend.